Hi there, welcome to another episode of 411 Pop Culture. Here at 411 Pop Culture, we're going to be listing down our favorite 80s movies. Joining me is Danielle Almendra, and we're going to be doing 4 episodes, various genres, counting down our favorite 80s movies. We sort of bonded together on 80s movies, so we figured it would be a good way to kind of cement our relationship while also showing you and sharing with you our favorite 80s movies. So stay tuned to the next episode because your picks might still be out there. And thanks for joining us for another episode. Tonight we're going to continue our 80s countdown of genre flicks. Our picks tonight are musicals, fantasy, and teen movies. My list of musicals are Grease 2, A Chorus Line, Annie, Yentl, and Shock Treatment.
My top 5 musicals of the 80s are Grease 2, Footloose, Staying Alive, Flashdance, and Little Shop of Horrors.
Now, starting right off with Footloose, I agree that it is a musical movie. The soundtrack is very essential to it, and most of the time in the 80s, a lot of times they picked songs or made songs for the movie.
Yeah.
And Footloose was one of those, from Holding Out to a Hero. In general, a great movie, but the soundtrack is essential to it, and I think it's iconic. Kevin Bacon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And Grease 2 is another one of our favorite movies together. Grease 2 is sort of maligned in history, but I think it's a great movie. There's Michelle Pfeiffer's performance is amazing. Maxwell Caulfield, Lorna Luft.
Adrian Zmed.
Yeah, they're all great, all great. And the songs are just as fun. Whereas Grease took more of a, took place in the 50s, but also used more of a 50s, 60s thing. I feel like Grease 2 was fun because they did 2, but also with more of an 80s spin on it. Cool Rider was one of my all-time favorite songs, let alone from a movie. And it's a fun movie, It's definitely not as sincere as the original, but it's great.
It's a good story. The costumes are great. I always love the Pink Lady jackets in that
they're
one
really good,
because they're, the 80s style.
Oh, yeah.
And
popping a little bit more.
And I'm not even ashamed to say it, but a couple weeks ago, I literally just listened to the soundtrack on repeat at work.
Sure, I believe
because
it.
You love those songs. They really get to you.
Yeah.
And it's energetic. And Michelle Pfeiffer, again, hands down. Great performance by her.
I definitely think it's inferior to the original, but I think on its own merit, it's a fun musical.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I also chose A Chorus Line. It's a simple concept. You've got a line of chorus members trying to become dancers, but there's a lot of heart to it. The emotions that these dancers come in, but there's also comedic moments like Dance 10 Looks 3 is a funny song. I Will Always Love What I Did for Love, and they changed it in the movie to being more about specifically the Cassie's character as in love, and she's singing about that as opposed to what I did for love and dance in general. But I love that the original musical play keeps it that way, but I also like in the movie, I think it makes more sense to do it that way. Staying Alive. Another one of those movies that's not specifically, they don't break out into song, but the soundtrack is essential to the movie, making it a musical. Again, another movie that I think is arguably inferior to the original Saturday Night Fever, but it's far more campy and enjoyable, and his whole dance sequence is great.
Yeah, he really buffed up for the
John Travolta.
Yeah, he buffed up for the performance. He looks great.
He dances the hell out of that at the end.
Oh, yeah. And just
some of it's a little hokey dancing, but it's great. Oh, she is great. Cynthia Rhodes. That sort of love triangle is wonderful. Yeah. Definitely. It's a different movie than Saturday Night Fever, but it's the same energy, but just placed in a different way.
That's what I think is so great about it, and people really look down on this movie, but at the end of the day, it's Tony Manero's journey.
Correct.
So this is you see his teens and early 20s and all this. This is how it happened afterwards.
Yeah.
He wasn't the great dancer that he thought he was going to be right away.
Mm-hmm.
And he got lucky. He got the Broadway performance, and he made something of it. And you don't really know if he went on to continue that career, but it wasn't really meant to be like Saturday Night Fever. It was a continuation of his life.
It wasn't going to be as gritty. It had those moments, but not as in your face, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also I loved Yentl. I saw it later in life, and Barbara Streisand, she's the only one that really sings in the movie, but she has these big, huge songs and moments, and it's a clever story. This woman wants to study religion, but she has to be a male to do it, but then she accidentally falls in love, and it's a great story through that. It sneaks up on you, and then the end finale number, she holds this note out for 20 minutes. That's amazing. Barbara Streisand's the only person who do this, and it's a great, fun story that's got heart and drama, and oh, when things kind of come to a head during the climax, I remember being like, oh, it's so intense. Like I wasn't expecting the intensity of this. Also, I think Annie is just a universal movie, you know, from comic strips in the 30s, 20s, 30s to now. We still hear about it, and Eileen Quinn's performance of the titular character will always be iconic, and I loved the change at the end of it. I couldn't imagine not having the railroad train thing that kind of comes up. She climbs up with Tim Curry's rooster changing her, and Carol Burnett as Miss Hannigan, Albert Finney, who always makes Danielle hungry when he talks. It's a great movie, which she does. Sorry to catch you off guard.
Another movie.
But whenever he talks, it's something about his tone. She's like, I want a cheeseburger.
I want a cheeseburger.
And then what else was on your list?
Flashdance.
Sure, another one of those movies that, you know, it is the song, but I mean, one of the biggest songs from the 80s, Oh What a Feeling, Irene Cara. I think that's the one she won the Oscar for. I think she won for that song. And it's a great story, you know, it's a very simple plot. I don't think you could watch it more than once, but the soundtrack in general, Seduce Me Tonight, it's just as fun. And then I also had Shock Treatment, the sequel to Rocky Horror Picture Show. I also came to it later. I think if I had seen it at the time, I probably would have hated it with everybody else. But I saw it with enough distance that I actually really like the songs from that. Bitchin' in the Kitchen, Looking for Trade. I'm like, oh, this is actually interesting. And again, it's one of those movies that was just too far ahead of its time in terms of reality television. And people didn't quite understand it. But I thought it was an excellent movie musical. All right, Danielle, go ahead and lead us on with your fantasy list.
My top 5 fantasy movies of the 80s are Labyrinth, Beetlejuice, The Witches of Eastwick, Legend, and Big.
And my list is also Labyrinth, Neverending Story, Willow, Beastmaster, and Red Sonja. I think we should talk about Labyrinth first and foremost.
Absolutely.
You know, it's also another one of those movies that brought us together, but it's sad because at the time it didn't do well, and Jim Henson was heartbroken about it. But it's such a cult movie now, and I think most people know about it. But Jennifer Connelly's performance, and it's terrific. You know, she's stubborn, but not obnoxiously so, in my opinion. Yeah, she's kind of bratty at first, but like I believe her. I'm not annoyed with her. And this journey she takes, but the whole and the still use of like puppetry and in this what I consider to be fantasy. My favorite kind of fantasies are the type where, like Harry Potter or something, where you're in reality but then taken into this fantasy world, as opposed to it just being the whole world itself, which is also good. But I like it's a journey then, and there's so many fun moments to it, funny moments, Hugwort. David Bowie is the songs in it as the world falls down.
The soundtrack is really great too.
Right, I would almost consider it a musical in of itself. And his, you know, David Bowie's songs are great, and he wrote them pretty quickly too. It wasn't, you know, but as the world falls down, that whole ballroom sequence, I think there's a certain yearning in all of us that it is sort of an interpretation of a young girl or even boy's thought of what it means to be an adult, and then when you do realize, wait a minute, it gets a little serious, I'm a little scared of this. And it's a great scene, the whole movie in general. But one day we'll do an episode on Labyrinth, because we could probably analyze it to death. But one of our favorite movies. Then I also had Neverending Story, which is also one of those in real life that gets affected by the fantasy world and vice versa. But I think it's a great one. Lamal's Neverending Story is one of my favorite 80s songs. And the story of Bastian and Atreyu and this book, and it's a great interpretation of what we do in reading fantasy, and it comes to life. But what was one of yours, you said?
Beetlejuice.
Oh, Beetlejuice is great. Hilarious, Michael Keaton, but I love the straight-laced Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin
Winona Ryder.
And Winona Ryder, yes, 100%.
Jeffrey Jones and Kathy O'Hare.
Yeah, that's great. The whole, I mean, one of the most iconic scenes of all time is that Deo. And it's clever. It's Tim Burton as Tim Burton. You know, you never know what you're going to get in one of these movies.
It's another one of those 80s movies that it's not like anything else.
Correct.
You're never going to be able to remake that. It's so great.
In and of itself, you know, it's a certain style that's 80s but not 80s,
but it starts like morbidly. I mean, they die. But then it's like, oh wait, but there's this whole other life and rule book after death.
The handbook, it's clever. It's just such a clever movie. And that you can still interact
with the living, and I think that it gives you hope for that. And of course the comedy.
It's so funny and intense. The end, you know, I remember that, you know, it still gets me a little bit at the time, like, oh wait, are they going to call it in time or call it the same amount of time? It's great movie. I also had Beastmaster was one of my movies that I remember watching with my older brothers when I was a kid, and I kind of link it also to my choice of Red Sonja. It's a very specific early 80s type of fantasy where, even with Conan and all those movies, but those are more in their world
Yeah.
centric. But Beastmaster 2 took it to the real world, so the sort of reverse of Labyrinth or Neverending Story, but also fun movies. And you said Legend was on there. That was a good one too. Tim Curry is the like demon devil guy.
Yeah.
He's wonderful in it. Tom Cruise too, another young movie.
Yeah, Legend's good for those reasons that you just said.
And I think Willow also, again, another movie that's sort of 80s iconic. I think it's a beloved movie. I also had on there as an honorable mention for me was the Ewoks, Caravan of Courage, and Battle of Endor movies. They were also movies I watched as kids. Caravan of Courage is more of a hopeful story, but Battle for Endor goes really dark. And I remember my mom not wanting me to watch it when I was a kid because she's like, I don't think you can handle this. And I did, but it scared me because she said that, and then it still scares me to this day.
Right?
When this witch changes form, I'm like, ugh. Not because there's some dark stuff that happens. I can handle that, but just the way this witch changed into another thing, I was like, oh, I can't handle that.
Well, and then, another movie on my list where it doesn't really seem like it would fit into fantasy, but Big.
Oh, sure.
I mean,
yeah.
It changes into an adult, which is, when you're a kid, you always want to be a grown-up. That's just, you want to be an adult. You want to be big. You want to be able to do all the things that you want to do. And then it's kind of like a reality check. But there's a lot of good, hilarious moments in that movie as well.
Yeah, it's a coming-of-age fantasy.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to Labyrinth, I mean, that's, her coming of age. It's his. His is all in the real world. It's this fantastical thing that occurs. But there's so many moments that we recognize immediately, like the piano. But you're right. It's the story of this boy wanting to grow up, and then when he does...
String. Who doesn't want to sit there and play with silly string like that?
Yes, in fact, that's where the first time I ever saw Silly String. I'm like, I want to play with it. Yeah. Yes, but good movie too.
He gets paid to play with toys on the other side.
That's
of the
also,
And you're so jealous.
I don't get it. What's his name? The guy, his co-workers, always pissed at him, but it was good movie. I love it.
And then Witches of Eastwick. I know you'll like
that. Oh yeah, Witches of Eastwick.
Great
we had trouble figuring out where to place that in our list, but yeah, I mean, you got Cher, Susan Sarandon, Michelle Pfeiffer, Jack Nicholson. Yep. I mean, you can't lose. Even though I don't think it did particularly well, it's a winner in my book. Yeah. I think it's a great concept. Yeah, I do love The House from also Flowers in the Attic. Yes, because it's the same mansion. Mm-hmm. But they take this idea of these three women who they all think that they want a man and that's going to be fulfilling. So this man comes that is
all the things
applicable to them, interchangeable in a way. Mm-hmm. And then they realize, oh no, it's not them. We have the power between ourselves, and that's the real power. Yeah. But there's really funny moments in it, horrifying moments, like when the one lady's puking up cherries all the time. And then but it's an interesting idea, and it's again fantasy, like Big, where it's not necessarily rooted in a fantastical world, but you bring a little bit of fantasy into everyday mundane existence. Yep. And then the last on our list are teen movies. My list is Just One of the Guys, Adventures in Babysitting, Heathers, Teen Witch, and Legend of Billie Jean.
My top 5 80s teen movies are The Goonies, Just One of the Guys, The Outsiders, Whitewater Summer, and Adventures in Babysitting.
Well, since we both had Just One of the Guys and Adventures of Babysitting, we'll talk about that. Briefly, Adventures of Babysitting, I showed this to our friend Jackie the other day, and she's a child of the 90s. She never heard of it, never saw it, loved it. And it is a classic movie of this simple story. We've all babysat. We've all been in that situation. But The Night from Hell, coupled with babysitting these suburban kids that end up in this very urban environment. And it's great.
Well, when you're young, I think you don't see how scary it really is until you become maybe a little older, I would say late teens, early 20s, and you're driving into the big city, and this trucker comes up with the hook hand.
Right.
And then they're in the bad parts of Chicago and stuff like that, it is scary.
Well, especially at that time in the late 80s, too.
Right,
but it's a great movie. I mean, Elizabeth Shue, it's a star-making role, she was hilarious in it, but acting.
Believable.
Very believable. And then Just One of the Guys is one of our mutual favorite movies, not just from the 80s, but all time. Gender-bending comedy about a teenage girl who feels like she's being, she's discriminated against for her newspaper article, so she dresses like a boy at another school, finds out it's not, but then she's kind of stuck in this position because she could still enter and win this contest. And it's a great story, a great little love story in there. It's got that sort of it's not like a highbrow humor. It's very much low comedy.
It's sarcastic humor.
But it
That's
also
what we
has
like, you know?
sure, yeah, very sarcastic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's very sarcastic.
Yeah.
But then she has her younger brother Billy Jacoby is hilarious and funny in it, and just all around it comes together for a truly great 80s movie. You get mid 80s, 1985 encapsulates
Definitely
that time.
quotable.
Very quotable movie, and yeah, just I think there's been a lot of gender bending comedies since the beginning of filmmaking, and this was definitely a great one in my opinion.
Absolutely. Then I've got The Outsiders.
Definitely, again, an 80s movie interpretation of something in the 60s, 50s, 60s, the Greasers. But, I think you had a lot of young stars in the making. Tom Cruise, Patrick Swayze.
That's all about cast, I feel like.
Yeah, they come together.
It
Ralph
is a good story,
Macchio.
but again, it's a sad story too. You know. So.
Oh, very sad. And it's again getting to see different perspectives. By the end, they can see other points of view, even though it's still the rumble occurs.
Yeah.
This release of tension, but it's a great story.
Yeah.
Great story. And then I also have Heathers on my list, which is one of my favorite black comedies, where this dark humor about high school life. It's like the anti-John Hughes movies. It's like these teens are like not concerned with just going to the dance. They are concerned with being the most popular in school and making sure they have all the power from that popularity. Right. The idea that you cut the head off of one, another head is going to appear. Winona Ryder again. Great role, but you also have, Shannon Doherty almost steals the show at times. And Christian Slater sort of became a heartthrob from this movie. But there's so much to be said, and it's so relevant to the day with like school shootings, bullying, self-image, and it's just a great, great movie. Funny, but horrifying, and even a little touching, but not like how you would necessarily, not in an obvious way.
Right.
And then one of my all-time favorite, the last two are my favorite 80s movies, which is Legend of Billie Jean, following Helen Slater. Helen Slater and Christian Slater, not really in real life, but brother and sister in the movie, end up going on the run with two of their friends, a young Yeardley Smith from The Simpsons, Lisa Simpson's voice in The Simpsons. But, the brother is being bullied. His scooter gets messed up. Billie Jean, she goes to take care of it, but then gets harassed by this guy's father. So somebody gets shot by accident, and it's an on-the-run movie. At the time, it was sort of, critically maligned, or it was mixed reviews, and even Pat Benatar didn't like it, and her song Invincible was in this movie. But I love her song Invincible, and I love it in this movie.
The most important part about that movie is when she cuts her hair.
Oh yes, it's really, so great. It's powerful.
Yes,
that whole Joan of Arc sort of quality. And you've got I love the chase sequence in the mall.
Yep.
It's very much, I think the problem with people, the reviewers at the time, was that it was very much made for the MTV audience. It was like almost a music video in of itself, but it had, a beginning, middle, end. It was quality, and I think the song Invincible very much fits in this movie with these ideas of what are we running for. That's the literal interpretation, but it's also we can't hide anymore. Like, I've got to stand up for myself. Great, great movie. And then I want to end on T-Witch, so what were your other choices?
I had Whitewater Summer.
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah. That's also another coming-of-age story. Yeah. Sean Astin, Kevin Bacon, where Kevin Bacon's kind of a jerk counselor type. And it is good.
But it's great because he's almost like the villain, and then you feel bad for him.
Right.
It's a great character.
It really is. Yeah. He really is, though, like this crazy villain guy that he evokes sympathy. Yes. It shows that not everybody's cookie cutter, because he's sort of judging Sean Astin's character, which is why Sean Astin's having this reaction, and then it kind of backfires on him. But then Sean Astin's now seeing a new perspective, and it's a good movie. Good movie. And then, were there any others on your list? Well, Teen Witch is one of my favorite cult movies. It's been given new life over the past years, but
I love it too.
It's and it's almost a musical in of itself, and they made a musical out of it at one point. But Robin Lively falls in love with the most popular boy, Dan Godier, and they have this sort of. You could believe that he could possibly fall in love with her if he wasn't in love already with the most beautiful girl, but then she finds out she's a witch, and it has these very 80s, also another MTV movie, if you will, where it's these sort of music video songs, and it's so cheesy, it barely holds itself together, but since it does, it really works.
And she kind of, once she finds out she's a witch, she does all those things you wish you could do.
Yes, exactly. It's a fantasy movie, in the terms of every girl's fantasy. We all want to be the most popular, and we all want to be be able to make, our worst teacher punish him back in a harmless way, but like have our wishes come true. We all want that person of our dreams to look at us. Sure, yeah. I mean, it's a funny, clever movie. The end is definitely my favorite 80s dance movie at the dance. And it all comes together in a way that's sort of about believing in yourself, and that's the real magic. And I highly recommend Teen Witch. Most of our generation has seen it through Disney reruns throughout the 90s, and then it found new life on DVD and Blu-ray. And if you get a chance, get the Blu-ray copy, because they all come back to do an audio commentary, which is great on it, and we loved it. But thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to check out our other episodes on our 80s countdown list of genre picks. Again, you might agree, disagree. Let us know in the comments below, because we're just real people talking about really everything here at 411 Pop Culture, and we want to hear back from you too. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Good thing is Danielle's got a whole bunch of yawns she's got to get out. Gina, be quiet over there.
No, I can't get it out.